Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. Before we begin the discussion, don't forget to subscribe to our official Telegram channel for regular updates on current affairs. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an important article from page number 8 of the Delhi edition. This article deals with the aggressive moves that China has been making in the Indian Ocean and the threat it poses for India. Over the last 2 decades, China has really stepped up its economic, military, and diplomatic influence all across the Indian Ocean, which has been a great cause of concern for India. See, traditionally, India has always seen itself as the dominant power in the Indian Ocean and has always treated the Indian Ocean as India's traditional sphere of influence. But this predominant position of India has been challenged by China in the last 2 decades, and especially after 2005, China has stepped up its military presence and diplomatic and economic influence all across the Indian Ocean. It has taken up a series of strategic port projects across the Indian Ocean, which has been dubbed the String of Pearls, which is apparently a Chinese strategy to encircle India and to contain Indian influence in the Indian Ocean. Then China has championed the Belt and Road Initiative under President Xi Jinping, and one of its key components is the 21st century maritime Silk Route that seeks to connect Chinese ports with all the major strategic ports across the Indian Ocean. Parallelly, the Chinese Navy, that is the PLA Navy, has been stepping up its military deployment into the Indian Ocean and has frequently dispatched its naval ships, submarines including nuclear submarines, and as well as spy vessels into the Indian Ocean. For example, there are two specific instances that come to mind in this regard. China and Sri Lanka have stepped up their military relations over the last few decades. And within the last 10 years, Sri Lanka has allowed the Chinese Navy to dock a nuclear submarine at Colombo. And more recently, Sri Lanka even allowed a Chinese spy vessel, the Yongwang 5, to be docked at the strategic Hambantota port. India has seen these developments with great concern, as this rising Chinese naval presence, accompanied with its rising economic and diplomatic influence, directly counters India's traditional influence in the Indian Ocean. All across the Indian Ocean, China has executed strategic projects such as the Kyokfu port in Myanmar, the Hambantota port project in Sri Lanka, along with upgrading the Colombo port and executing other key projects in Sri Lanka. China has even leased an entire island from Maldives, where China is building connectivity and transport infrastructure, and is also executing the strategic Gwadar port project in Pakistan as part of the China Pakistan Economic Corridor. The China Pakistan Economic Corridor, along with the China Myanmar Economic Corridor, which connects China with the Kyokfu port of Myanmar, allows China to overcome its Malacca dilemma, which is essentially China's weakness and dependency at the Malacca Strait. The strategic Malacca Strait is a choke point through which much of China's trade passes through, including its oil imports from West Asia. China has always been concerned about a possible blockade at the Malacca Strait, either by the United States, which has a major naval presence at the Diego Garcia Naval Base, or even by India, which has a major military presence at the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So for China, it has always been a priority to bypass the Malacca Strait, and the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor and China-Pakistan Economic Corridor allows China to execute this bypass and directly access the Indian Ocean without having to depend on the Malacca Strait. China has carried out a similar outreach towards East African countries as well, such as Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, and others, and it has even set up its first foreign naval base at Djibouti over here, overlooking the strategic Bab el Mandeb Strait. Even across West Asia, China has stepped up its military and economic presence, and in the name of countering piracy near Horn of Africa and Gulf of Aden, the PLA Navy has been aggressively involved in maritime patrols, which is perceived by India as a strategic threat in the Indian Ocean. While India continues to exercise its traditional influence across Bangladesh, Bay of Bengal, Myanmar, and even across Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, Madagascar, and East Africa, India has increasingly felt cornered by the rising military, economic, and political influence of China all across the Indian Ocean. Now, this topic acquires all the more significance because recently China's Development Aid Agency, SIDCA, or the China International Development Cooperation Agency, has hosted a 19-nation summit named as the China Indian Ocean Region Forum, which took place on the 21st of November at Kunming in Yunnan province of China. This forum was organized by SIDCA, which is China's newly established development aid agency that provides development assistance to other countries. And China had invited hundreds of participants from around the world, including 19 important Indian Ocean countries. Curiously, it excluded India, and according to China, this forum was attended by 19 countries, including Indonesia, Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, Nepal, Afghanistan, Iran, Oman, South Africa, Kenya, Mozambique, Tanzania, Seychelles, Madagascar, Mauritius, Djibouti, and Australia. Most of these countries happen to be close maritime partners of India as well, and India is already working closely with some of these countries in securing and stabilizing the Indian Ocean. So it's in this context that the China Indian Ocean Region Forum acquires significance and raises concerns for India because it marks the increasing economic and diplomatic outreach of China towards the Indian Ocean. Apparently, this region forum was focused on the concept of blue economy model, which promotes the sustainable exploitation of marine resources. And in the joint statement that was issued at the end of the China Indian Ocean Region Forum, the focus was on disaster management, providing HADR assistance or humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to Indian Ocean countries, and also in promoting coordination and building resilience against any shock or adverse events, disasters, enhancing the supply chains of the region, and promoting fisheries, renewable energy, tourism, shipping, etc. While China claimed to have invited India as well to take part in this forum, India was not one of the official participants at this forum, but India has definitely taken note of this development. According to reports, the Indian industry was represented in a non official capacity, but interestingly, two of India's close friends, Maldives and Australia, immediately denied these reports and they said that whoever participated in this forum, they were representing Maldives and Australia in a non official capacity, and hence these countries denied having officially taken part in the China Indian Ocean Region Forum. So, this definitely does weaken China's claims and China's attempts. But however, one cannot take for granted the organization of such a large forum, which involved major powers of the Indian Ocean, some of whom are friendly to India and some of whom are openly hostile to India. So this brings into question as to what measures has India been taking in the Indian Ocean to protect its traditional sphere of influence and to counter the Chinese presence. India has built very close bilateral relations with many of the Indian Ocean countries, including Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, and as well as with many East African countries and few other countries in West Asia and Southeast Asia. India has primarily focused on regional groupings such as the IORA or the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which India founded in the 1990s along with South Africa and Mauritius. And today, this grouping has become the most dominant grouping of the Indian Ocean. This grouping has 23 member states covering most of the littoral states or rim states of the Indian Ocean, along with 10 important dialogue partners. You can see the members of IORA clearly represented over here. And through IORA, India has been promoting economic cooperation, disaster management assistance, and as well as trade and cultural relations all across the Indian Ocean. Plus, Indian Navy also organizes the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium that has brought many navies of the Indian Ocean together to discuss and coordinate over critical issues that are affecting the Indian Ocean. Recently, IONS even hosted its first military exercise led by the Indian Navy. Then India has even set up a chain of coastal surveillance radars, not just covering India's coastline, but India has even extended this to friendly countries such as Mauritius and Seychelles. India continues to be a major defense partner for small Indian Ocean countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, and Mauritius, and continues providing them defense equipment, which also enhances India's military presence in the region. India has even leased strategic islands such as the Agalega Island from Mauritius and the Assumption Island from Seychelles, and reportedly, India has been trying to build transport connectivity infrastructure on these islands. These could potentially become future military bases for the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force. India has even championed another regional initiative called the Colombo Security Conclave that brings together India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, and even Bangladesh and Seychelles to focus on the key security issues of the Indian Ocean. India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Mauritius happen to be the members of the Colombo Security Conclave, with Bangladesh and Seychelles being observers. There are proposals to expand this security conclave to include Myanmar and other few countries as well. India has even gained port access to strategic ports such as the Sabang port in Indonesia, very close to the Malacca Strait, and as well as the Duqm port in Oman. Apart from this, India has been cultivating close relations with East African countries by providing them economic assistance and disaster management assistance, especially to Mozambique, Tanzania, and others. India often rushes disaster management assistance whenever they are hit by cyclones, and even during the recent pandemic, India supplied medical equipment and vaccines to most of these countries spread out across the Indian Ocean. Plus, India is also working with major powers which have an influence in the Indian Ocean, such as the US, Australia, France, and others. India has even become an observer to an important grouping called the Indian Ocean Commission that focuses on the western part of the Indian Ocean, which includes members such as Mauritius, Comoros, Madagascar, and few other important island countries in the western part of the Indian Ocean. So, through such a collective response, India has been responding to the rising presence and influence of China. And it's in this context that the recent China Indian Ocean Region Forum, which has been hosted by China, acquires significance. India has been closely watching these developments because the PLA Navy is actively looking to increase its military presence across the Indian Ocean. The PLA Navy is looking to develop 6 aircraft carriers, out of which 3 of them are already operational, and China would like to place at least 2 of these aircraft carriers specifically in the Indian Ocean region. So India is also gearing up for the challenge, and it's been trying to increase its economic, military, and diplomatic presence across the Indian Ocean. Now let's look at an important article from page number 6 that deals with the topic of soil degradation and soil management. The Hindu has brought out this article to commemorate the World Soil Day, which is marked every year on the 5th of December. This day is marked and celebrated by leading organizations such as the United Nations, Food and Agriculture Organization, and the others to promote more attention on conservation of soil health and to advocate the sustainable management of soil resources. This day was designated back in 2014 when the first official World Soil Day was marked. The idea to commemorate such a day was actually proposed back in 2002 by the International Union of Soil Sciences. This proposal was taken up by Thailand when it was leading the Global Soil Partnership, and the Food and Agriculture Organization supported this initiative. Following this, during the FAO conference in 2013, the World Soil Day proposal was accepted, and the first official Soil Day was marked on 5th December 2014. The theme of this year's World Soil Day is to highlight the fact that soil is where food begins. With this theme, the UN and the Food Agriculture Organization have been promoting the conservation of soil health, and India is also an active participant in these efforts. See, soil is essentially a combination of different minerals, organic matter, and living things. This forms the very basis of all life forms on Earth, be it plants, animals, birds, or human beings. Everybody is dependent on the soil, as this is where our food and nutrition comes from. So it's very essential to ensure that the soil health itself is maintained and balanced, and ensure that the soil has all the required nutrients in order to provide for adequate productivity. Once the soil loses its health and nutrients, it immediately affects agricultural productivity, as such a soil would become infertile and nutrient deficient. Soil nutrient loss happens to be one of the biggest concerns with regard to food management, because large scale soil degradation, which is going on around the world, threatens nutrition and pushes the world towards hunger and food insecurity. It's in this context that one needs to understand the multi-purpose role played by our soil system. As we know, soil is absolutely essential for ensuring food security, and it is also vital for storing water and providing for water through the groundwater table. It also sustains a host of biodiversity and also provides for construction of human settlements and urbanization. Soil plays a key role in climate change and mitigation efforts as well, as the soil is a great store of carbon and is known to hold the second largest reserve of carbon. Soil plays a critical role in the entire biogeochemical cycle, and that's the reason why a dedicated day has been allocated to promote the awareness about soil conservation in order to tackle soil degradation. Studies have shown that in the last few decades, soil around the world has been losing nutrients, and this ongoing soil degradation is directly affecting the availability of essential vitamins, nutrients, and micronutrients in the food that we are consuming. This not only leads to food insecurity and hunger, but could also lead to deficiency of essential micronutrients, which in turn leads to several diseases, including poor physical health and mental health. More importantly, degraded soil not only loses the ability to support crops, but certain soil systems could get saturated with very high levels of unnecessary nutrients that could even become toxic to the environment. The main contributors to soil degradation come from anthropogenic sources, such as industrial activities, large scale mining, irresponsible and unscientific waste treatment, unsustainable agriculture, which depends on deforestation and slash and burn cultivation, large scale fossil fuel extraction, and even harmful pollutants and emissions coming out from the transport industry. They all contaminate the soil and degrade the soil. And this threat is further aggravated by other factors such as soil erosion and weathering, runoff due to fast flowing water, leaching of the soil, burning of crop residue. These combination of natural and man-made factors further accelerate soil degradation, and this could have devastating consequences on hunger and nutrition. In India, 29% of the total land area is prone to land degradation and soil degradation, which further contributes to desertification and drought conditions as well. So, this has a very serious impact, not just on agricultural productivity and biodiversity, but it also affects the quality of water available in the region as the water gets toxic and polluted. And this could also have a long lasting socio-economic impact, especially in rural areas and on the farmers. According to data brought out by the Government of India, around 3.7 million hectares of land in India suffers from nutrient loss in soil, which essentially refers to the depletion of soil organic matter. If soil is depleted of essential organic matter, it eventually affects the nutrient availability, thereby affecting productivity as well. Along with this, excessive and abusive use of fertilizers and pesticides, along with overuse of irrigation, that too with contaminated wastewater, has aggravated the threats. And this, in the long run, leads to devastating consequences, not just for human life, but also for the entire ecosystem. So, considering the seriousness of this threat, the Government of India is implementing a five-pronged strategy for soil conservation. The government approach is focused on making soil chemical free by limiting the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. The government is also promoting the saving and conservation of soil biodiversity, including the biome systems and the organic matter found in soil systems. The Agriculture Ministry, along with other stakeholders, are focused on enhancing soil organic matter concentration, along with maintaining the required levels of soil moisture. Government efforts are also focused on mitigating soil degradation and preventing soil erosion and soil degradation. To achieve these objectives, the Government of India has brought out initiatives focused on soil health, and it has introduced the Soil Health Card scheme in 2015. This provides required data regarding different soil types in the country, deficiency of soil nutrients, and the soil moisture levels, which helps in better conservation programs. The Soil Health Card scheme provides vital details about the health of the soil and allows policymakers and the farmers to carry out suitable changes through farming and other methods to protect the nutritional value of the soil. Then we have the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which is focused on preventing soil erosion, regeneration of natural buffers, rainwater harvesting, and recharging of groundwater table as a measure to counter the adverse consequences of drought and soil degradation. We also have the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, which promotes sustainable organic practices in agriculture and cultivation that is expected to reduce the stress on soil and farming. Because widespread use of chemical inputs can lead to long term consequences, and India is trying to address these concerns by promoting organic and natural farming through the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. The Government of India and the state governments are also collaborating with the FAO, or the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, to support sustainable agri-food systems that focuses on soil conservation. And the FAO has been collaborating with the National Rainfed Area Authority and Ministry of Agriculture to develop required forecasting tools so that farmers can be provided with the right data and inputs to help them make informed choices about the crops that they are going to cultivate, especially in rain-fed areas, in order to encourage the cultivation of such crops which promotes and protects soil health. The FAO is actively assisting India in these efforts by working with the central government and also with several states, and it is directly backing the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihood Mission along with the Ministry of Rural Development to create community resource persons at the grassroots level by providing them right training and capacities and skills so that these community level workers could share the knowledge with farmers on adopting sustainable and resilient practices in agriculture in order to create agri-nutri gardens that not only provides for nutrient vegetables and other nutritious crops, but it also focuses on protecting the nutrient level of the soil system. The FAO is working with several states, including Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Mizoram, Odisha, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, and others, to boost crop diversification so that the adverse consequences of monoculture can be prevented and region climate specific crops can be cultivated in order to best protect the soil health. In Andhra Pradesh, Food and Agriculture Organization has even partnered with the state government and the Indian Council of Agricultural Research to support the farmers in sustainable transitions to agroecological approaches and organic farming. So, this combined effort of the center, the state governments, with the help of international institutions such as FAO and the UN, is helping India to focus on soil protection in order to prevent its degradation and loss of nutrients. Now, let's take a look at another column from page number 8. The column examines the digital rupee which has been introduced by the Reserve Bank of India. Recently, the RBI has rolled out a pilot project to introduce e-rupee or digital rupee both for the wholesale segment and the retail segment. This digital rupee would be the electronic equivalent of the Indian currency and it would be legal tender or fiat currency backed by the government. This promise was made by the Government of India in this year's budget to introduce a digital rupee based on blockchain technology to counter the adverse consequences of digital and cryptocurrencies. The government stated that the RBI will be coming out with a digital rupee to provide for a more efficient and cheaper currency management system and to boost digital payments and digital economy in the country. So, in line with these commitments, the RBI has rolled out this pilot project through few banks, which introduces e-rupee as a digital rupee that could be stored in digital wallets and transferred just like any other transaction, and brings along with it a number of advantages. For example, compared to a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which has no value of its own, a digital currency like the digital rupee would be tagged to the Indian currency and would be seen as legal tender. The digital currency would be regulated by the RBI, unlike other cryptocurrencies which are decentralized and unregulated. Digital currency will address all the issues concerned with cryptocurrencies, such as its volatile value, misuse, and widespread usage for illicit activities like money laundering, terror financing, etc. But digital currency backed by the RBI and regulated by the RBI would help in streamlining the economy and provide for efficient transactions. And it would also help the government and the RBI keep a check on all the transactions, thus dealing with all the economic threats. But however, critics point out that a digital currency may not be the equivalent of a cryptocurrency. And it could also bring up a number of risks which are not anticipated by the government and the RBI. One of the biggest risk factor is that if people adopt digital currency on a large scale and convert the cash that they are holding into digital currency, it might lead to a possible situation where there is a cash shortage with the banks, which in turn directly affects their lending abilities because the loans provided by banks is directly dependent on their cash situation. Next, in a major development in Iran, reportedly Iran has decided to shut down its morality police, which has been the center of controversy for the last few months. See, Iran turned into a theocratic state in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution, as this popular uprising against the then Shah of Iran was hijacked by the radical Shia clerics, who turned the country into a conservative state and an orthodox country under the Ayatollah. Since then, Iran has been enforcing a rigid version of the Sharia, and 15 years ago, when President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was in power, Iran set up Gasht-e-Ershad, or the morality police, to enforce the Sharia as per the interpretation of the Iranian authorities. The morality police consists of both men and women who patrol the country in these white police vans you see over here with green stripes, and their responsibility is to enforce strict dress codes and social conduct. And if they notice any violations, be it with regard to the way in which women dress, or even the haircut of men, and the way in which people conduct themselves in general, everything is under the scrutiny of the morality police, and any violations are strictly punished by the morality police. Violators are not just penalized, they are often pushed into re education centers as well, and many times they even face abuse and violence, which allegedly was seen in the case of Mahsa Amini, who was a 22-year-old Iranian woman who was arrested by the morality police and reportedly she died in custody. This triggered massive protests across Iran, and it became the immediate trigger in the country for the people to bring out their frustration against an authoritarian Iran. So, after weeks of protests and global condemnation, apparently Iran has decided to shut down the morality police. However, these are still tentative reports because there are counter reports as well in the Iranian media that this is fake news and there has been no official decision taken by the state to shut down the morality police. But the lead prosecutor of the Iranian government publicly stated that the morality police is being shut down, and this has been picked up widely by global media outlets. Now let's take a look at this article on page number 1 and 10. Germany's foreign minister is all set to visit India, but before the arrival of the minister, a controversy has already broken out. The German foreign minister has made a controversial reference to the role of the United Nations in the Kashmir dispute, and in the past has agreed with Pakistan to call upon the UN to play a greater role in resolving the Kashmir conflict. This comes in the backdrop of the foreign minister expressing displeasure against India's position with Russia, as India has continued oil imports from Russia despite the sanctions by the Western countries and the ban placed by European Union and the oil price cap placed by G7. So as India seems to be breaking away from the Western countries in targeting Russia, the German foreign minister has called upon the UN to play a role in the Kashmir dispute. So here it becomes important to examine what exactly is the role of the UN in the Kashmir conflict. See, when the Kashmir dispute broke out in 1947, immediately after the partition of India and Pakistan, India brought a temporary end to the war by calling for a ceasefire and took the matter to the United Nations. Because India placed faith in the newly created international organization to help resolve the dispute peacefully, and accordingly, the UN adopted a resolution establishing the UN Commission for India and Pakistan. The role of this commission was to investigate the issue and mediate between the two countries. By 1948-1949, the two sides had firmed up their ceasefire line, which was backed by the UN, and the United Nations even deployed the UN Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan to monitor the ceasefire line and ensure that both sides uphold their commitments to maintain the ceasefire. Under the UN resolution, both India and Pakistan had even committed to hold a plebiscite in J&K to decide upon the sovereignty of this disputed region. But very soon India realized that it was a costly mistake to take the matter to the UN, as UN was not seen to be acting in a neutral, unbiased manner. The UN, which was dominated by US and UK at that point, was seen to be aligned more towards Pakistan, and India increasingly grew uncomfortable with the role of the UN over the Kashmir conflict. But under the Karachi Agreement, India was bound to respect the ceasefire line and allow the UN to play a role in monitoring the ceasefire line. because this had been codified under the Karachi Agreement, which had been accepted by India. So accordingly, the UN Military Observer Group started functioning in both India and Pakistan in the conflict-hit region to monitor the ceasefire line. But in 1972, India carried out a historic diplomatic move through the Shimla Agreement after the liberation of Bangladesh. And as Pakistan had conclusively lost the war and surrendered, India held the upper hand and pushed Pakistan to rename the ceasefire line as the LOC, or the line of control, thereby technically eliminating any role for the UN in resolving the Kashmir dispute. Since 1972, India has firmly maintained that Kashmir conflict is purely a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, and India has ruled out any role for a third party in resolving the Kashmir dispute. This includes the UN as well, because India changed the terms through a clever change of language. Because through the Shimla Agreement, the ceasefire line of 1949, which had been codified under the Karachi Agreement, was now renamed as LOC, or line of control. So the UN Military Observer Group has no role to play, according to India, because there is no ceasefire line anymore since 1972. It's on this ground that India strongly rejected the statements of the German foreign minister, as India strongly believes that UN has no role to play in the Kashmir conflict. Now let's take a look at this article from page number 10 that deals with India-Afghanistan relations. A Taliban delegation has met the Indian diplomats stationed at Indian embassy in Kabul, and the Taliban representatives have called upon the Indian ambassador to consider more Indian investments in Afghanistan in order to help in the development of Afghanistan. So here it's very important to understand that when Taliban was in power for the first time between 1996 and 2001, India had not recognized the Taliban, and India had cut off all relations with Taliban because India saw Taliban as a terror outfit. Even the Taliban, which was very closely aligned with Pakistan and its ISI, had thrown India out of the country and had shut down the Indian embassy. Post 2001, after the Taliban was thrown out by the US led coalition forces, India immediately reached out to the new Afghan civilian government, and since then it has played a critical role until 2021 in assisting the development and reconstruction of Afghanistan. In these 20 years, India has invested nearly $3 billion in the country in more than 400 development projects, which includes the construction of the Salma Dam for irrigation and hydropower generation, the construction of the Afghan parliament in Kabul, the construction of a strategic road linking Zaranj and Delaram, construction of power transmission lines, along with major investments in economic development, in building schools, hospitals, in providing consistent humanitarian assistance through food supplies, and in also providing consistent support to Afghanistan in training and capacity building to train and educate Afghan students, Afghan civilian officers, and as well as Afghan military officials. India also boosted connectivity with Afghanistan, directly helping in its economic development by linking Afghanistan with the strategic Chabahar port in Iran, and also by establishing a direct flight corridor between the two sides. But all these Indian investments are staring at an uncertain future after Taliban captured power again in the country in 2021. But in the last few months, both the sides have made a new outreach, and India has not only sent humanitarian assistance and reopened its embassy, but it has also started engaging with the Taliban. On the other side, Taliban has also been welcoming of India, and it has called upon India to increase its development assistance and investments in the country. Now let's take a look at the mains practice questions. The first question: China has rapidly expanded its economic, military, and diplomatic influence in the Indian Ocean over the last 2 decades. Examine how it affects Indian interests and discuss the countermeasures being taken by India to protect its traditional sphere of influence. The second question: Soil health is critical for all life forms on Earth. Evaluate the threats arising out of soil degradation and examine measures being taken by India to conserve soil health. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link has been provided in the description box below. So with this, I would like to conclude my discussion, and if you found the initiative to be helpful, do support us by liking the video, share your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.